There is a plant growing on 6 continents. It contains 5 times more magnesium than spinach. It produces 70,000 seeds per plant, and those seeds can remain alive in the soil for 40 years. Ancient bog bodies were found with this plant still preserved inside their stomachs. 2,400 years ago, yet the Western world classified it as a weed. Here's the thing. You may be spending $30 to $50 a month on magnesium supplements. Supplements that research suggests your body only partially absorbs. Meanwhile, what may be the most magnesium-dense leafy plant available is growing in your backyard right now. And you've been pulling it out and throwing it away. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what this plant is. You'll understand why 3 separate civilizations cultivated it for thousands of years, and why we forgot. And you'll know how to add a powerful natural source of magnesium to your diet. One that costs you nothing. The seeds have been waiting in your soil for 40 years. The question is, will you be ready when they finally decide to grow? Every winter in northern India, millions of families still cook this plant every single morning. They cook dark green leaves with a dusty white coating into curries and flatbreads. This is not spinach. This is not kale. This is batha. And over 300 million people across South Asia eat it every single week. In Nepal, farmers call it bethu, essential winter nutrition. In Turkey, villagers call it asirik, gathered from wild places for generations beyond memory. In Mexico, traditional cooks call it quelite. They fold it into tamales. They stir it into soups. Hundreds of millions of people, 3 continents, 1 plant, and you've never heard any of its names. Here's why. You know cilantro, same plant as coriander, different name for the leaves versus the seeds. But Western food culture unified those names. Everyone knows cilantro. It's in every grocery store. This plant never received that unification. Dozens of names across dozens of languages. No consistent name means no consistent presence. In cookbooks, in research databases, in funding proposals. The fragmentation was not intentional, but the result was erasure. But the fragmentation is recent. The historical record tells a completely different story. In 1950, Danish workers cutting peat from a bog near the village of Tollund discovered something that would change archaeology forever. They found a human body, so perfectly preserved that they initially called the police. They thought it was a recent murder victim. The body belonged to a man who had died over 2,400 years ago. Scientists named him Tollund Man. His face was so perfectly preserved, you can still see his closed eyes, the stubble on his chin. He looked like he was sleeping. But scientists were most interested in something else. His stomach. In 2021, researchers from the Danish National Museum performed the most detailed analysis ever done on Tollund Man's last meal, using advanced microscopy and lipid analysis, published in the journal Antiquity. One plant appeared in higher concentrations than any other grain or seed in his stomach. The plant we are discussing today. It was not a weed to him. It was food. Intentional, cultivated food. And Tollund Man was not alone. 5,000 miles to the west, an entirely separate civilization made the same discovery independently. In the river valleys of eastern North America, indigenous peoples began intentionally cultivating members of the goosefoot family approximately 5,000 years ago. They selected for larger seeds. They built storage systems. Archaeologists call this the Eastern Agricultural Complex, a sophisticated food system that predates the arrival of corn from Mexico by nearly 2,000 years. 3 separate domestication events. The Andes of South America, the highlands of central Mexico, the woodlands of eastern North America. 3 independent civilizations across 3 continents, thousands of years apart. All looked at this plant and reached the same conclusion. This is valuable. This is worth cultivating. This feeds our people. For thousands of years, this plant was considered essential food. And here is perhaps the most revealing connection of all. You've heard of quinoa, the ancient Andean superfood that now sells for $8 a pound at health food stores. The grain that appears in every wellness article. Here's what almost no one knows about quinoa. And here's why it matters for this plant. Quinoa, Chenopodium quinoa, the plant we are discussing today, Chenopodium album. The same genus. They are close relatives. And when researchers finally compared them directly, the results were striking. This so-called weed demonstrated superior amino acid and nutritional profiles compared to quinoa. The weed outperforms the superfood. The free plant beats the $8 a pound one. Research from the U.S.D.A. Botanic Garden compared wild edible species against common grocery store vegetables. Lamb's quarters versus lettuce, spinach, and cabbage. The magnesium content was more than 5 times higher. More than 3 times as much calcium. 3 times as much vitamin C. In a 100-gram serving of raw leaves, you receive 96% of your daily vitamin C requirements for only 43 calories. But here's the detail that makes that number even more significant. Spinach is well known for oxalates, compounds that bind to minerals like magnesium in your digestive system, reducing how much your body can actually absorb. Research on Chenopodium species found lower oxalate interference ratios compared to spinach. Better bioavailability. More of what you eat may actually reach your cells. So why did we forget a plant this powerful? The answer lies in how it survives, and why that survival is a problem for certain industries. One lamb's quarters plant produces an average of 70,000 seeds. Some plants produce over 100,000. And here is what transforms that abundance into something permanent. Those seeds remain viable in soil for 12 to 78 years. One study documented viable germination after 40 years of burial. Your great-grandmother could have planted this once, and you could harvest from her original planting today. Consider what this means for the global seed industry, which generates over $60 billion annually. The industry needs you to buy new seeds every single planting season. Many modern varieties are hybrids that don't breed true. Some are patented, but this plant refuses to participate. It self-seeds. It spreads. It cannot be controlled through purchase cycles. The magnesium supplement market reached $3.5 billion in 2023. Industry projections show growth to nearly $7 billion by 2032. That growth depends on continued deficiency. Government data suggests nearly 90% of American adults are not meeting the recommended daily intake for magnesium. Deficiency creates demand. Demand creates markets. This plant is a solution, and solutions are structurally bad for product-based markets. Search PubMed, the database of published medical research. Search for fish oil studies. You'll find over 15,000 results. Search for magnesium supplement research. Thousands more. Now search for Chenopodium album nutritional research. A few hundred studies. Most conducted in India, Nepal, or Pakistan. Almost none funded by Western institutions. One word appears again and again in the academic literature describing this plant. Neglected. Neglect is not conspiracy. No shadowy meetings occurred where executives decided to suppress this plant. The mechanism is simpler and in some ways more revealing. What cannot be owned cannot be sold. What cannot be sold cannot be marketed. What cannot be marketed does not enter public consciousness. Economic systems tend to fund and remember what benefits economic systems. Consider white clover. For 80 years, American lawn seed mixes contained clover because it fertilizes soil naturally. Then herbicide companies needed new markets. Clover was quietly removed from seed mixes. Those same companies began selling herbicides to control the very plant they had previously sold as beneficial. No conspiracy. Just a simple truth. What cannot be turned into profit tends to be forgotten. The same pattern played out with this plant. The plant doesn't care about quarterly earnings or shareholder value. It's been growing in sidewalk cracks, in garden margins, in disturbed soil across 6 continents. Waiting. And identifying it takes less than 30 seconds. Let me show you exactly what to look for. Wait. Before you rip out whatever is growing next to your tomatoes, take a closer look. The plant is called lamb's quarters, Chenopodium album. And here is the entire cultivation secret. Stop pulling it out. That is it. That is the laziest gardening method you will ever learn. Here is how to identify it in 30 seconds. Look for a dusty white coating on the young leaves, almost like someone sprinkled flour across the surface. The leaves are triangular or diamond-shaped, roughly 3 to 7 centimeters long. The edges have irregular teeth. Dark green on top, sometimes slightly purplish underneath. and small clusters of tiny green flowers appear on spikes at the top as the plant matures. The plant most commonly confused with lamb's quarters is orach, another member of the same family. Here is the important fact. Orach is also edible. The confusion poses no danger. You may end up with slightly different greens. You will not end up harmed. Have you ever pulled this plant out of your garden before? I bet you have. Drop a comment below and let me know. I used to throw it away too. Now, harvest. This is where the lazy gardener approach really shines. Harvest the young leaves when plants are 6 to 8 inches tall. This is when they are most tender. Cut the top growth. New leaves regenerate within days. You can continuously harvest throughout the growing season without replanting, without reseeding, without doing anything except returning to the same spot. The flavor is mild, slightly mineral, a hint of spinach, but lighter. The young shoots can be eaten raw in salads or blended into smoothies. Cooked, treat them exactly as you would spinach. Sauté with garlic. Add to soups. Fold into omelettes. One preparation note. Like spinach, lamb's quarters contains oxalates. For most people, this is not a concern. But if you have a history of kidney stones or plan to eat very large quantities regularly, a brief blanch reduces the oxalate content significantly. Pour boiling water over the leaves. Let sit 2 minutes. Drain. Please consult a healthcare provider for personalized dietary guidance. And yes, cooked lamb's quarters is safe to serve alongside your family meal. As with any new food, introduce it gradually. Raw in large quantities is not recommended for dogs or cats, as with many leafy greens. But this is a plant that has fed families across 3 continents for thousands of years. Cook it and enjoy it. But here is the part my grandmother understood that I didn't until recently. The seeds. At the end of summer, when the seed heads turn dark and dry, strip the clusters into a container. Winnow lightly by pouring seeds between 2 containers in a light breeze. The chaff blows away. Store the cleaned seeds in an airtight jar, somewhere cool and dry. Those seeds remain viable for 40 years or more. $0 for a natural magnesium source that self-replenishes every season. A powerful complement to whatever else supports your health. Compare that to $30 to $50 a month for supplements. $360 to $600 a year. My grandmother kept a jar of these seeds for decades. I used to wonder why she kept what I thought was a jar of weeds. Now I understand. She was keeping food security. She was keeping independence. She was keeping something that asked nothing in return and gave everything. So let me bring this all together and answer the question I opened with. Lamb's quarters has fed people for thousands of years. A 2,400-year-old bog body in Denmark still had it in his stomach. 3 independent civilizations on 3 continents domesticated it. It was never a weed. It was food that lost its name in the Western world. According to research from the U.S.D.A. Botanic Garden and the Journal of Food Composition and Analysis, it may contain 5 times more magnesium than spinach, and it outperforms quinoa across multiple nutritional measures. The most magnesium-dense leafy plant available may already be growing in your yard, and you can identify it in 30 seconds. Harvest it for free. Store the seeds for 40 years. $0, 0 infrastructure, 0 replanting, ever. The seeds have been waiting in your soil for 40 years. Now you know what they are. The only question left is, will you stop pulling them out? Next spring, when your neighbor looks over the fence and asks what you're doing with those weeds, you'll smile. And you'll say, "This weed may have 5 times more magnesium than anything in your supplement cabinet. It grows itself. It seeds itself. And it cost me nothing." That's not just smart gardening. That's independence.
Go outside right now. Look at your garden, your sidewalk, the edge of your yard. If you see diamond-shaped leaves with a dusty white coating, don't pull it. That may be the most nutritious plant in your entire yard. Our grandparents knew how to work with nature instead of buying their way around it. If you enjoy these kinds of practical, old-school gardening secrets, hit subscribe so we can meet again next week. And one more thing. Lamb's quarters is not the only so-called weed hiding superpowers in your garden. Right now, the dandelion growing in the corner of your yard is keeping a secret you would never expect. That story is coming next. Happy gardening!